I think that you also need to understand threats. Often violent acts are preceded by threats. They can be explicit, veiled, spoken, unspoken, specific, or vague. So what does that leave? It can be anything, and it's how the people take it. Somebody used an example yesterday that guy got into it with a coworker. The management broke him up. We're trying to get them both to calm down. And as this guy left the other guy, he says, just think about what's most important in your life. Consider that a threat? Well, most of us would, yeah. So understand that these things can be, we don't want to poo-poo these things to a certain extent. We want to understand that those threats can be real. Behavior may or may not be observed by others. And the other thing is, it may be an offhand remark. But again, it might be a reckless remark as well. And remember that you're dealing with individual perceptions. And you don't want to blow those off, because to the individual, they're real. If that's a perceived threat by them, you need to address that. If you don't agree that it's a threat, then you need to be able to work with them and convince them that that's not a threat. But in most cases, if their body or their mind is telling them that's a threat, you need to address that in some way, shape, or form. So you want to start by actually doing an assessment, a vulnerability risk and threat assessment for both your internal and external risks. So when you look at your internal, what kind of an organization are you? Are you a caring, trusting, positive environment? Or do people hate coming to work? What kind of an environment do you provide for your people at work? What would you think about is there for that? And that goes into reporting, doesn't it? Because we want people to report things to us. How do we want them to report it? With what information do we want them to come to us with? We want to be able to do an analysis of those incident reports to understand where some of our risks are. We want them to report things to us so that we know that there are problems. Things happen within your businesses all the time, and you guys know that this is going on, but sometimes we turn a blind ear to it, or blind eye, or we tone our hearing down because, well, we're just not going to be able to fix that. But I think that we have to be able, if we listen intently. I had a colonel one time that I worked for, and he called me into his office and he says, I don't think my organization, he says, you just get vibes, and he says, I don't think my organization's working on all 8 cylinders right now. I can feel like it's not working. So you know these things within your organization. You can feel how your organization's running. You can see how that is. So I think it's a focus you need to have. And also understand this. This is Park Dietz, and he's a psychologist, and he approaches these things. And one of the things he looks at is, first of all, what kind of an environment do you have? If you have a toxic work environment, what is that toxic work environment doing to your employees? It's that pressure cooker. It's the causal factors, right? It's cooking in there. It's those things that are creating problems for you. And once you have a toxic work environment and now you're starting to affect the employees and they're becoming more troubled, is it any surprise it can just be anything on the triggering event, right? So you're setting yourself up for problems. So you really want to address these particular issues so that you don't have to deal with the triggering event and the escalation that then follows. So on the external side of things, part of your analysis, look at the police reports and communicate with your neighbors. What's going on in the neighborhood you live in? What's kind of happening around there? Because there's a lot of things that happen that you don't realize unless you're talking to folks and investigating to kind of finding out what's going on. Do you have restricted areas within your business that people can go to if they don't feel safe, that they can barricade themselves in? We do that at State Fund. We have all these mechanical rooms. We have what we call the BEAT team, and the BEAT team is the Building Evacuation Action Team. And we all have the combination to those locks so that we can unlock those doors, and if people need to get into those mechanical rooms, we can barricade into those rooms. So we do have that ability. So we're looking for restricted areas. Do we have areas that people can go to that they can feel safe, that they can get away from whoever it is that they're worried about? How about physical security devices? What kind of devices do you have? We have some cameras up, some security cameras, but that also helps you identify certain issues. What kind of security devices do you have? Do the doors lock behind people? So in State Fund, we have doors that, for instance, we meet people not at our desk, but we meet people, our clients, out off of the lobby. Those little meeting rooms have 2 doors going in and out. How about parking lots? You know, in the state of Montana, that even if you're working day shift and you're working 8 to 5, in the dead of winter, what? Yeah, it's dark when you go to work and it's dark when you go home at night. So think about what the lighting looks like in your parking lots, and where do you require your employees to park? Don't we want them away from, we don't want them taking up the good parking spots that our customers use, so we want them parking in the back. Well, when they park in the back, is there any way to make sure that they're getting safely to their vehicles and stuff? Because then that creates an area where someone could accost someone without much problem, as far as being a little bit more secluded, and you wouldn't see it. So look at your parking lots, take a look and see what's happening, because once they leave the facility, they're at risk. How about installation of panic buttons? Does that person have a panic button at the front? Now, see, State Phone, we had a panic button, but it didn't ring all over the building, which is one thing we couldn't understand. So the lady would push the button, and it rings in someone's office in the basement, and it rings in a couple of offices on the first floor, and then it rings in a couple of the vice president and the CEO's office upstairs. A lot of us think, you see a button, you go, I'm covered. No, you may not. You have to really look past those things and make sure where they're at. And then also look at your workspace design and setup. And here's where you can actually get some help, because you can go out into your law enforcement community and ask them to come through and just kind of do a checkout. Well, number one, they get to understand how your building is set up to a certain extent. That helps them in case they need to come in. But it also helps them understand, they can point out things to you that normal people don't think about, But you want to have, if possible, I know we're mostly in cubicles now, I know I am. There's only one way in and out of a cubicle, and if someone comes to visit, I got to go through them to get out. So in a lot of cases, we have a lot of meeting rooms and things like that we're set up in. So it's a little different, okay? But looking at your workspace design and setup and making sure your folks have a way of interacting and being able to get out of harm's way if they need to. Also looking at your hours of operation, number of employees per shift and per location. That's going to tell you who's in increased risk. Employee awareness. I'm just telling you that as an employee, sometimes we have to increase their awareness, because what they think they can handle may not be how we want them to react or interact or whatever the thing is. So we really have to work with our employees to bring their awareness up with what they're subjecting themselves to. Treatment of customers. I think if your policy is the customer's always right, and we mentioned that before, I think it's unfair to your employees, because that puts them in the place of always being wrong. And that's not fair. So I think we need to take a look at that, and we need to address it. But we do want to make sure that our customers are treated appropriately, with respect, and taken care of, okay? But I think there's limits as far as you're not always going to make them happy either. So you have to do the best you can, but you can't put your employees always being in the position of being wrong, but at the same time trying to meet your expectations. And then again, having procedures for response. What do you expect your people to do in certain circumstances? You have to understand that training them to do what you expect them to do. And again, it can go anything from just handling that agitated customer or coworker to the point to where they're actually trying to escape out of the building and everything else like that, or they're reporting. Whatever it is that you want them to do, you have to set the procedures and make sure that they understand how those procedures work, okay? Because if you want them to evacuate the building, is there a difference between evacuating the building in a fire situation and evacuating the building in a workplace violence situation? Yeah, because where do you go in a fire? Everyone comes to the main hallways and everyone goes out the main exits, right? We do it as a group of people. I think you mentioned it before, target-rich environment, right? So if that's how you have people trying to get out of the building in a situation where you have an active shooter, holy cow, you've just set a whole bunch of people up for problems, right? So think through what you want your people to do, how you want them to handle situations, and if they are to evacuate, where are they to go, and how are they supposed to protect themselves once they leave the building?